All right, everyone, welcome back. Today we're talking about legendary disc jockeys, FM mind control, new wave mania, and Jeff's teenage quest for the most 80s pants ever created.
Hey, Jeff, we got an email. Believe it or not, even though I plug the email address at every episode, which is nicepullpod@gmail.com, nicepullpod@gmail.com. Somebody was listening, or somebody wrote that down. We got an email from a former classmate of ours. I'll just identify her now as Glenda B.
Right on.
And Glenda was actually at our reunion a few weeks back. She did not get the opportunity to come up and say hello.
She's our first email, I think, right? Right, Chris? So that would be our first writing into the show email we've received.
Yes, I wasn't going to highlight that, but yes, Jeff.
Well,
maybe I should provide a text number. I don't want to give out our numbers out there, but yes, she was our first
Chris,
email.
I would almost guess that if you did give out our personal addresses even, I don't think people are going to be pulling up on our driveway clamoring to talk to us. But what did her email say?
Hi, guys. Love your podcast. I've listened to every one of them and excited for more. And this is an actual classmate of ours, okay? Not a family member.
That's right. It's not Chris's mom.
My mom could not send an email if her life depended on it. So I saw both of you at our reunion, but didn't get a chance to sit down at the table with you. I have a discussion topic for you.
All right.
I remember listening intently to radio station personalities and long-form record albums. KGB, Dave, Shelly, and Chainsaw / Dawn Patrol. KPRI, Bree Walker, that sultry voice.
Oh, my gosh,
DJ who eventually became on television and became, again, a local celebrity on another level. And the LA stations, KMET, Jim Ladd, KLOS, Fraser Smith, Dr. Demento. Back when the DJs picked the music, that's another subject entirely, right? Maybe they picked the new music. Maybe they picked it after a little bit of persuasion.
Chris is talking about cocaine,
Thanks.
Everybody. Cocaine.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about
you mean
cocaine.
Sexual favors. Okay, gotcha. All right.
Yeah, those DJs.
Or sexual favors and cocaine.
Exactly. Or maybe just cash, which most people would tell you they would prefer over both.
Yep.
Or at least one. Anyway, so appreciate you, Glenda. Again, Glenda, thanks again for that email and the kind words. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
We appreciate you listening and keep sending your ideas. And I don't care if Glenda's the only one who sends things to talk about. That's fine. But she's absolutely 100% right. I mean, again, the DJs were familiar to us. We felt, we'd listen at certain times of the day, certain shows. We'd listen to certain stations. And like I said, I think the stations that we picked based on the musical styles, based on the programming, based on, yes, the DJs, the personalities, and based on whatever sort of ideal persona that we saw in ourselves or what we thought we saw. And obviously you don't have that anymore.
No, not really. No.
Right? Because you create your own station, right? I'm going to just listen to whatever, and Spotify will tell you what you want to listen to. And creepily enough, they're right a lot of the times, not to Spotify, any of the streaming platforms, but it was so different in that regard because, yes, what station did you listen to was, again, it was almost like maybe one of the first things that kind of stood out for us, where we thought was, well, what's the cool station? What stations should I be listening to? What station shouldn't I listen to? Really just one step away from what music. And again, and I'm not saying it was that forced, because we like what we like, right? But there was a certain amount of, I don't know, just sort of, like I said, cachet, a part of your personality and a part of who you were, who you wanted to be based on, the station you listen to, because it was an extension of the music that you listened to.
I mean, you and I talked about this a bunch of times when we were talking about TV, which is you basically had three networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS. And then later on, you had cable TV. But even then, it was half a dozen stations or so. So it was incredibly limited. That's why people could become celebrities so much quicker in some ways and have such long staying careers, because there was only a limited amount of bandwidth on TV and a limited amount of TV shows and movies. And the stars were the stars, right? And what were there? About 100, 150 people that you saw again and again and again and again and again and again, right? So they just became huge. Now it's so spread out and there's so many trillions of different options. And to your point, Chris, in the world of music, it's even more exaggerated because, yeah, you're right. Back then, you had one major choice to make. Am I an AM guy or am I an FM guy? Right? And pretty quickly in the 70s, man, if you were AM, dude, come on. Your parents were AM people listening to Mario Lanza and The Sound of Music, right? FM was where it was at, right? That was rock and roll. And then on FM, what station do you listen to, right? And for anybody that grew up in the 70s and later in the 80s, man, if you didn't pick the right station, if you identified with the wrong music, that could have major effects on your social life, on your street cred. It definitely had to do with the crowd you hung out with. And as we got from the 70s into the 80s, even more so. And Chris, you know my favorite analogy, the Warriors, right? Where New York street gangs are all after one gang and they all have different identities. That was us, wandering around. Are you a rocker? Are you more of a Jimmy Page kind of a guy? Or are you more of a Peter Frampton guy? Or are you more of a Kiss kind of a dude? Or, God forbid, do you like, pop music and kind of like bubblegum music, right? You had to choose, right?
And you had to choose carefully, right? You had to, and we talked about this several, episodes back about guilty pleasures, right? And songs. And I'm not going to, and I'm going to try to stay as far away as possible from, I don't want you to get your game face on and start talking about Sammy Hagar or Journey or any of the other people that live on that perpetual shit list of yours, right? So I need to make sure I don't want to tread into those
waters,
growing, right? But that's okay. I know, I can see it. It's like you're turning into the Hulk, right? As sort of like you're turning green. But you had to choose very carefully, right? Maybe 1,000%. Were you 1,000% honest? Possibly. It's like kind of like maybe the first time you were trying to, let's say you were having a drink, and maybe it was a really heavy beer or something that somebody gave you to drink, and there's no way in hell you could say this tastes like crap, right? You swallowed it and kind of go, yeah, it was good. Maybe there were music or musical acts or songs even that you kind of said, yeah, that was good, right? And maybe you didn't really like it, but not liking it would have really, like I said, taken, it would have had a major, effect on you and not liking it, or admitting that you didn't like it, but, and yet the way the spectrum, and I think that's the thing that was interesting. I think it's interesting now when, and again, one of the stations that we grew up with, right, which was KGB, has been classic rock for as long as I can remember, right? Probably as long as you remember. But now the classic rock, you'll hear U2 and Pearl Jam and Green Day and Nirvana on the classic rock station, because I guess what's the definition of classic rock if it's 30 years or older, right, or something like that?
Yeah.
It's like a class, like what makes a car a classic? I think it's like 30 years.
Yeah.
Although I don't know if there's a lot of classic Honda Accords driving around out there, but there's that gap to where it becomes, and you and I maybe have had that. It's like, oh crap, the music that I grew up with or remember very distinctly, again, liking and arguing about and telling people, yes, the very first I want to say, I think we've had this discussion. And again, I bought it on 8-track tape. Again, when we talked about physical media a while back. In the very first group that I bought that maybe you could classify as quote unquote new wave, okay, was the first Cars album.
Okay.
Which
yeah.
front to back, top to bottom is a great, to this day, that's a great freaking album.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Great songs when you hear them today, again, it probably, if I had to go down the list of the Cars would probably be in my top 20 favorite groups, maybe. Again, especially when you go off that first run with the Cars followed by Candy O, it's like, give me a 1-2 punch first and second album, better than that. Be hard pressed to find that. But you're going to find the Cars now on classic rock or, Resurrection Weekend or something like that, when it's just like, holy crap, I'm old.
Yeah.
But I can remember, again, it's like kind of going out on a limb, like, yes, I like the Cars. Yes, and it's definitely not Led Zeppelin, and it's definitely not Rush, and it's definitely not Van Halen.
Yeah.
But it's pretty damn good, and it's sustained itself. So maybe I was, and again, like I said, I didn't think I took any risks with that. But at the time, maybe I thought I did, because I like the Cars. And Just What I Needed is a great freaking song, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I remember a guy in high school, I was in automotive shop class or whatever they call it, right? Where you work on
auto shop.
See, I can't even not say right words, not have good grade that class much at all. And one of the kids in that class, I mean, he was my age, kind of a stoner kid. I don't even know if he smoked pot, but he just kind of had the flannel, and just had that kind of that look. And he pulls me to the side one day in auto shop and says, "Hey man, don't tell anyone this, but I like that song Rock Lobster by the B-52s. But dude, I swear to God, if you tell anyone, I will get so fucking mad at you." And I just thought, really? That's your big dark secret? Wow. And you could just tell the look of terror on that kid's face, that somebody might find out that in addition to Led Zeppelin and Judas Priest, he also likes the B-52s. Oh my God. But yeah, back then, man, it was a huge thing, right? What you listened to really defined you and your social group.
I can remember a kid specifically who fit that demographic description, grabbing another kid who decided he had shaved his head pretty closely and he wanted to be a punk rocker. And this one kid would literally grab him and put him up against the lockers in gym class. And we talked about that many episodes back, about the horrors of the gym and gym class and the locker room, and would hold him up against and squeeze his head and he would ask him, who rules, until he finally said something like Van Halen. He would let him go. He would let him start breathing again. And he's getting bullied over his musical choices, even though clearly, and again, Jesus Christ, we're 13, 14 years old. And this is the kind of, who knows where he is now. I don't know where either one of them are now, but it was that. And that was the extreme point, right? Talking about the station that you listen to or the music that you listen to.
Well, and that kid is now Senator Ted Cruz. I'm not sure if you know that or not. That's the same guy. Very, very upset.
I knew he looked familiar.
Very upset. If you didn't like,
I knew he looked familiar.
Again, your identity centered around it. And you could always tell, the kids that I always kind of wanted to hang out with were the kids that had like an eclectic, kind of a taste in music, where they would like some of this, some of that. They were open-minded to different things. It was always the dudes that were Led Zeppelin or else Judas Priest, the Scorpions, Black Sabbath, or fuck you. Man, that was not a fun crowd to hang out with, man. And I mean, let's not get into it for the 100th time, but at least 3 of my 14 fist fights that I can count from grade school until high school had something to do with music. And it was probably my fucking fault, but, so sarcastic, but, anyway.
Well, and so I guess probably throwing probably a few rock fights too.
Well, I don't remember throwing rocks over music, but yeah.
Over Are We Not Men? We Are Devo. What did you say about Devo? You're across the street, but God damn it, I'm going to throw this rock at you.
Yeah.
Let's face it, there were the kids who they decided that was going to be their persona. That was going to be their identity. It's like, you know what? I'm going to
all in.
Give myself, shave my head. And yes, I'm a punk rocker.
Right.
I can remember these kids that one day they were dorks and the next day they were punk rockers, or they were a mod. It's like, hey, I got a trench coat and a fedora. Look at me. So it was like, and again, as kids are always trying, and again, I guess that's what high school is all about, sort of finding yourself. But you shouldn't. It was kind of the equivalent of finding yourself at Party City, right? Because I'm gonna go and find this outfit and a haircut, because some of them were literally overnight. Okay, It was like, hey, on Friday he was wearing an OP shirt, and on Monday, all of a sudden, again, he's all but riding a Vespa. So I think again, and finding yourself through, and I guess I don't know. Is it a bad? I don't know. I'm not going to judge. I'm not a psychologist. I never did anything like that.
Yeah.
If some people are struggling to belong, struggling to be a part of something, and if that's the way they do it, I guess as long as they don't hurt anybody, right? The old adage, as long as they're not holding their head against somebody's head against a locker or threatening beating them up over Judas Priest and UFO, then that's one thing altogether, right? So
there definitely were the kids that dabbled in different musical styles and the fashion that went with it. I was definitely one of those kids that was more of a new wave kid. And Chris, for sure, man, on many occasions, more than I can count, I went to school with parachute pants on. And for those that don't know, that is basically nylon material, the same material I assume they make parachutes out of. But, so many zippers, Chris. That's a lot of zippers.
Was it the actual?
And no, I don't know if it's the same material, but I had dark green parachute pants, like a plastic belt, and my poor girlfriend.
Did you wear pointy shoes? Like
I didn't wear the pointy shoes. I think I actually had a really nice girlfriend in high school. She put up with it, or maybe she was also very fashionable. So we were quite the mod new wave bookends there. But I also did, Chris, I don't know if you ever did this, but I did the hair too. So I had not crazy hair, but it was definitely bleached blonde on the top and then dark black on the sides. So kind of a statement, I would say, for back then, but I never did the mohawk, man. I always really admired the kids that just went all in, man. Just shave your head, like you said, or an actual mohawk, not one of these faux hawks that you see nowadays. And of course, on that note, and speaking of bands that, are just the coolest ever, back when I was a kid, one of the coolest bands for me was Bow Wow Wow, right? And their front lady, Annabella Lewin.
Annabella, who was like our age. Did you know that at the time? She was like 17 or 18 years old.
Dude, our age, she was younger than us. She wasn't even our age. She was two.
Okay, then that's wrong.
Yeah,
okay.
On that first album, she's like 15 years old. So, and she had a full mohawk, and I just thought, oh my God, you can't even get cooler than her. And I saw that band, Chris, 15, 20 years later at a giant flashback to the 80s outdoor concert. And yes, when she took the stage, I thought it was a joke because she looked so young and so amazing. She almost looked better. And I thought, it's not possible. How could that be Annabella Lewin? And sure enough, I started doing some research and like, oh, fuck, she was like, 3 years younger than me when she was, popular in that band. But again, long story short is I definitely dabbled in the fashion part of it. And Chris, I will never forget the day that I took it too far. Don't ask me why, Chris, I wanted this pair of pants that now look they almost look like motocross pants. You know what I mean? They're like super tight pants with a giant red stripe down the sides, and then picture little nylon straps that are going around your thigh and around your shins, so you look like you're getting on, right, a motorcycle, right, to do some jumps. If that wasn't ridiculous enough, right, I had to go all the way up to
Why?
LA to find him.
Why?
Why is it ridiculous? Or why did I have to have it?
No, why did you do this?
I don't know. I just
Yes.
saw it on some
I understand.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw it on some TV show. I cannot remember for the life of me what inspired me, but I thought, dude, those are the coolest pants ever. And in my stupid pea-brain mind, I had to get those pants. And I drove with my friends at the time all the way up to LA, found the weird little store back in the 80s that sold these total crazy punk rock strap pants. And I'm like, oh man, they fit. It's perfect. And I was so excited the next day to wear them to school. But by the way, Chris, it wasn't just the pants. And you have to understand, these look like marching band pants with bondage straps. That is how uncool these things were, okay? And added to that, I had a shirt that I wore with the big wide shoulders, and it was bright red with this kind of weird 1980s like black stripe going off to the side. And it just looked like Buck Rogers from like a 1930s, sci-fi serial. It was the most ridiculous combination of clothing you could ever imagine. If you saw me wearing it right now, you would think it was a joke, like a reenactment of how stupid they looked in the 80s. And dude, I went to school that day thinking I was the biggest badass there. I'm like, everyone, behold, check me out. And to say that it did not go over well is an understatement. Even the cool kids that saw me, they took pity on me. They're like, dude, I want to kick your ass so bad. I'm just going to give you a pass because I just can't even fucking believe you did this today. But good for you. I hope you make it home alive.
So you went from the parachute pants to the motocross pants.
That's the most I can call
so
it.
You clearly had some sort of pant. You had some sort of pants progression going on.
Yeah.
And you so much so that you drove to LA.
I did.
To go to a store, a specific store, because you couldn't get these at the mall, right? You couldn't get these at your random. We didn't buy it. Certainly, there was no way to buy them online.
I had to have those pants,
or maybe catalog.
Yep.
But you had to have these pants, and maybe this is sort of subconsciously because you talked about when we talked about motocross bikes. Maybe it's just a natural progression that and again, I'm thinking about the hair. Yes, you didn't have the mohawk, maybe because you couldn't have the mohawk working at Captain Kidd's Galley. Maybe that wouldn't have been the thing.
Captain Kidd's Seafood Galley. Yep, that's where I worked. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. You mohawk. Yeah, but hard to get the hat or the hairnet or whatever you had to have on that thing. And again, I'm trying to think back the hairstyle, but the two-toneness of it. I don't remember that about you, but
yeah.
I never went to that sort of extreme. I think there was a part of me, the one thing that I thought was cool and again, getting into the 80s vibe. And I think anybody, and again, we even saw some recently, all the little pins that you would get, right? That you could get these little tiny real lapel pins, right? And maybe you put them on your cool sort of, it wasn't like a windbreaker. It was a sort of a cloth jacket or something like that. And it might be the Specials or the English Beat,
right.
Or if you're really cool, something like the Selector or something along those lines.
Nice.
I remember I had a few of those pins, but I kept them I didn't even wear them. I put them on the visor, the sun visor of my car.
Oh, okay.
Right. That's where my cool is. So I went the other extreme. It was just like, no, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to have a haircut like that. I didn't feel confident.
Let's put cool in air quotes, but okay.
Air quotes. Right. I didn't have the confidence to a haircut or a certain style of clothing that I think I just went for ultimately by the time I was like a senior in high school, it was, by the time we were seniors, it was just the preppy crap, right? The nice polo shirts and the Oxford shirts and the topsiders, the pink Oxford. My favorite was like a pinstripe pink and white tucked into my 501s with, either my penny loafers that were actually had pennies, in the burgundy penny loafers or the topsiders. That was as far as I went. So whatever you call it, the preppy look, and that was a look, that was a choice, right? But I think I felt more confident in that to be anything else, because I think that was, again, that was much more mainstream.
Chris dressed for most of his high school life as the antagonist in every John Cusack film. He was the preppy with the popped collar. He looked exactly like the guy that was the king of the ski slopes who was challenging you and stealing your girlfriend. That's what Chris looked like. He didn't act like, by the way. Chris was awesome. And I'm not just saying that because he's sitting here talking with me, but Chris looked like the cool frat kid back then, the guy, again, in every 80s movie that you're like, oh man, I'm going to hate that guy. That was Chris.
Yes. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see James Spader from Pretty in Pink, or.
That's what I saw, though. I saw him. Oh yeah.
Right. What was the character in Better Off Dead? Roy Stalin, right?
My favorite Chris was the guy in Valley Girl. Remember the movie Valley Girl with Nicolas Cage? And we talked about that last episode or a couple episodes ago.
Right.
But and his famous line is, "She must be losing her mind. No other Val dude can touch me." The ultimate Valley guy with the popped collar. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. So I guess I subconsciously related closer to the villains. Maybe the villains were just better dressed. I think
they were.
That's without question. Right. When you talk, throw out like the Breakfast Club, like the guy you were describing who would beat you up if you didn't like, what was it? Judas Priest or Led Zeppelin or something like that, was essentially Judd Nelson in the Breakfast Club, right? The flannel, the long hair, the beat, the boots, everything about it, a sort of a hint of violence.
Chris, I would say you were more of the Emilio Estevez character. Not completely, but you were more of that guy, sports centered.
Oh, are we going to get racial now? Are we getting into race? No, not.
No. I just meant his character, sport, you're more of a popular sports kind of a guy. And I was much more of an Anthony Michael Hall type of a guy. Not only did I weigh 110 pounds, but I was definitely the skinny smartass getting his ass kicked all the time. That was me, getting not necessarily shoved into a dumpster, but definitely, not appreciated.
and getting a B in shop class, right? Like the kid in 16 Candles, right?
The only difference is I did not feel suicidal after that. I was fine with that.
Okay, right. That auto shop that you talked about. But no, the sports shop, yes, that's what I aspired to. So maybe let's take a step back and no, by the time 10th grade was over, I think I was done competing at any kind of sport level. But yeah, I guess I didn't, like I said, at least from a fashion sense, I was just, I related to the villains, whether it was all those movies that we talked about or TV shows. They were just better dressed because there was something about them. Because I think if you're appealing to the outcast, right, the kid who doesn't fit, the kid who doesn't belong, well, of course they're not going to have the best clothes because they've got no dad at home and their mom's working 2 jobs, and she comes home and asks, "Honey, what's wrong?" And she's got like a bag of groceries with like a baguette like sticking out the top and maybe some carrot tops as well, right? That whole sort of.
Well, they all have to have a baguette sticking out the top. That is a Hollywood must, yes.
Right.
Just like all bombs have to have a timer on it that says exactly how much time is left before the bomb explodes. Those are Hollywood things you have to have. Yeah.
That never syncs up with it's a 5-minute scene, even though the bomb's going off in 59 seconds. It's like, wow, that's a long minute.
3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2.
Yeah, the kid, the outcast couldn't be dressed well.
Right.
Daniel LaRusso, when he moved from Jersey to Reseda, he somehow inexplicably at one point in that movie is wearing a Charger jersey, which no kid from New Jersey would ever have even had access to. I don't think, again, because we're talking, you wouldn't be able to buy one unless you got it from Goodwill in Reseda. But no, so it's like, really, it's like Daniel LaRusso's mom starting out a new life. Could she have bought him some new clothes? could he have not had like a red windbreaker? Like, who wears a red windbreaker that's not a security guard, right? But I mean, that's the kind of
I'm not aware of her finances, the backstory to that character, but you're right. It was slim pickings. He was like a cartoon character, right? Where he's almost always wearing the same outfit throughout that entire film. I liked the other thing that they did with the poor kids in the movie Pretty in Pink, where you had Molly Ringwald's character and John Cryer's character, and they were poor kids, but their solution to it was to be really good at going through the thrift stores, right? So all their clothes, which was common back then, were like vintage 60s clothes that they somehow acquired in the 80s. And by the way, pretty funny when you think about the time difference between us growing up in the 70s. Chris, when you think about somebody, you were talking about classic music and how it's no longer the same bands that we grew up with. Now classic music would be later on, right? Like not even Nirvana. I mean, classic music is stuff from the early 2000s nowadays, right? But for a kid now to actually think that Flock of Seagulls was a cool band, that would be no different than you and I in the 80s listening to music from the 1920s. So try to wrap your head around that.
Absolutely.
Try to wrap your head around that for a second.
Absolutely. Right. But there's certain kids that maybe they might appreciate, like I know, and your sons are probably the same way. It's like my son will appreciate, we make jokes about every time we're in the car together and if we have terrestrial radio on and somehow, some way, Guns N' Roses comes on. Every time. It's either Sweet Child of Mine or Welcome to the Jungle, okay, or November. It's one of these songs.
Paradise City.
A kid today has an appreciation and an understanding, and maybe even like I've seen, you'll see footage or you'll see like there could be, things going on in your kids, your sons probably, even though they're older and in their 20s, to the sense of like, yeah, they could be somewhere and somebody cranks up Welcome to the Jungle and everybody kind of their toes are tapping and they get the energy and they get into it. It would have been the equivalent of you and I, like, hey man, somebody just cranked up Rock Around the Clock, right? Or Good Golly, Miss Molly, and we're like losing our minds because, oh my God, Little Richard, this is awesome, and it didn't happen, right? It just didn't happen. So time has stretched, but time has shrunk at the same time, which is how many times?
It's very Stephen Hawking of you. All right.
Thank you. But you know what I mean? So that in itself is, and yet they don't listen to radio stations.
No,
they don't have, and it's like, I don't want to be the old man yelling at the cloud, because it's like I said, their music, their choices, they have control over it. Think about that. How different would your musical choices have been? Again, when we get back to the stations with the groups, when you had this guy afraid to tell you that he liked Rock Lobster, or that first time, knowing you, where you were like,
that kid had other psychological problems, though. Yeah. I got the feeling that this was just we were scratching the surface on that guy's issues, but okay.
But think back to when you were like, you had that sort of, and I don't know, I don't want to call it epiphany or revelation or something, where it's just like, I just listened to, my first Devo record, and I'm going to get up and put the needle back and listen to it again, right? Because now you can choose the music. I guess you kind of listen to what's in the air. I guess kids are still like what their friends are listening to or whatever, that influence or that peer thing. But we had it sort of thrust upon us, right? Because again, if you were listening to KGB or KPRI, or when 91X changed into new wave, rock of the 80s and all that kind of stuff. But like now it's all out there. It's like, again, I'm literally going to call up a genre, a group, or a style or whatever, and curate it completely on my own. Right. So I don't even know how you do that. I don't know how I would have done that. I mean, I guess again, I'm not saying it's inferior, but to me, it's like, wow, how does that work? Because again, we're sort of just thrust upon it, right?
Good point. I look back Chris and I are talking about, of course, as always, Southern California, specifically San Diego. And a lot of us were really, really tired of listening to the same 15 to 20 songs played over and over and over again. And again, I'm not going to go on my shit list right now, but I am just going to mention that would definitely include Journey, right? And that would definitely include a lot of just the mainstream rock and roll bands. And by the way, a lot of those bands back then that I was super sick of and didn't like, I later in life came to love. Bands like, Aerosmith. I like Aerosmith now, and ELO. Didn't understand them back then. Love them. Tom Petty. Not a fan back in the day. Can't say enough about how much I love Tom Petty nowadays. So, but there was a rumor that one of our radio stations in San Diego, who had traditionally played pretty much mainstream rock and roll, was going to make a daring program change and pretty much exclusively play new wave and kind of like punk music and alternative music is what it was called back then. Ooh, alternative. And I'm telling you, man, the anticipation in the air. And I had a couple of buddies, one of my favorite friends, Mark. Mark knows who he is, who introduced me to Devo, a really good friend of mine. He's the one that kept telling me, dude, here it comes. You just wait. Today's the day. And I remember the very first song that they played on 91X. Do you remember what it was?
I want to say it was a Sex Pistols song.
It wasn't. It was a song by kind of like the queen of new wave back then, hugely popular back then. Most people would never have heard of her, Lena Lovitch. And it was, I'm pretty sure it was her song New Toy. No, Lucky Number by Lena Lovitch. And if you ever listen to that song, okay. That is the quintessential new wave song of all time. I would say between Lena Lovitch and Missing Persons, you can't get more female vocal new wave sounding than that. But it launched this whole thing where now finally guys like me who like to be a little bit different and not listen to mainstream shit and wanted to hear bands like the Ramones and the Sex Pistols and Devo and the Buzzcocks and the Cure. Now, to Chris's point, you have every song ever written, another 2 million songs appearing on Spotify every single day. You just, there's no more, oh my gosh, can you believe it? It's just, so many choices. But again, back then it was a big deal. And to Chris's point, and, to Glenda's point, right? Which is the DJs, the radio personalities, they became celebrities because of it, right? The people that were early on radio personalities for 91X are kind of like legendary by today's standards. Again, Steve West and Adventures in Paradise was another great show late at night in San Diego. And what were some of the other DJs in San Diego, Chris?
Well, I think in 91X, I think of Mike Halloran and Pam Wolf, people like that.
Right.
Obviously, there was a guy named Oz, Jim McGinnis, right, who was on the air forever.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
Brian Shaw, right, was another guy, I think, with 91X. And then, yes, your wacky morning guys, right? The wacky morning guys, whether it was Jeff and, and I think they all kind of knocked off what was going on in L.A. because L.A. had Mark and Brian. So then down in San Diego had Jeff and Jer, right? And do all these wacky morning shows that were like comedy shows, right? Wasn't a lot of music interspersed in there, right? But again, I can remember those ones all off the top of my head. Again, we talked about Bree Walker and we talked about, and it was, but you're right, they were personalities. And so then they were the ones that curated it. Maybe it is better. Maybe it's better that you can decide right off the bat. And yes, like all I'm going to do, you mentioned, like, you know what, I'm going to create playlists, or I'm just going to listen to The Cure all day long and not have to get up out of my seat. Not like I had to go and move an album or a CD or something like that. And then they're going to suggest songs based on that, which is a little bit creepy. Like, yeah, I do kind of like that song. How did they know? Our kids different now because they have more choice like that? Are they different because they don't have it thrust upon them? Because somebody is not I guess that's the point. Somebody was telling us, we think this is cool. We think this is good. And you should too. And if you do, then guess what? You're also cool, and sometimes they were right. And I'm not saying that's all 100% wrong, because no, the artists that you mentioned, the songs, the albums, that's an enormous part of our growing up, right? And it's like this, do you want to be really cheesy and say it was like a soundtrack? Absolutely was a soundtrack that we had, right? You can think about songs to this day, and I don't care. You can think about a song that, it reminds me of back whenever. And it was funny because it was in 16 Candles, but True by Spandau Ballet was played at every freaking dance we had in high school, right? Even the after school dance, they would call them the green, or they were in the early evenings called a green and gold dance. I don't know if you remember those. It was in the gym, and it was just something on a Friday night. And if you left, they wouldn't let you go back in because they were pretty sure you would go out drinking and you couldn't come back into the green. But
They were right, by the way.
they were absolutely right. Every time I hear that song, I'm back in the gym during the green and gold dance, and it was just like, here's Spandau Ballet and this who had 2 or 3 good songs their entire career, but that was one of them, right?
The other song that you had to have at every single school dance, which was the antithesis of True, was What I Like About You by the Romantics. That's the one where anytime there was a lull, anytime there were too many kids sitting down or up against the wall, all you had to do was the da 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 na na da na da na 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 da 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 na 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 na. And I think what I really loved about music that was maybe not mainstream, right? Now that song was mainstream, but bands that weren't mainstream, really cool new wave and punk and alternative bands that I liked back in the day. What I loved the most about it was the adventure of it. You weren't going to hear them on the radio unless you had 91X, and even 91X didn't play all the stuff, right? In order to get exposed to that music, you didn't have Spotify. The only way you could do it was to hang out with really edgy, kind of cool people and listen to their album collection and go to their house or hang out with them in their cars and listen to it on a cassette tape, or, God forbid, the coolest thing ever, actually go check out live music. You probably weren't going to do it at the sports arena or a stadium. This was the kind of shit that you would see in some weird, grimy, hole-in-the-wall nightclub, probably down in downtown San Diego. How you're going to get there, I don't know. There were sections of San Diego back then that were just as edgy as Tijuana, quite frankly. And of course, to this day, and we had it back then, the Casbah, which is still down there by the airport, just an incredible club. But that's the place where you would see bands that you would never have heard of. And back then, Chris, we even had like a 60s garage punk, kind of like a revival movement where there were a bunch of bands that dressed just like they were right out of the 60s and the 80s, which was also fucking cool as hell. So what a cool time for music, man, especially the stuff you could search out, on a weird weeknight. Yeah.
Right. Well, they had, and there was also these, could you call them clubs? Because they were all ages, right? A place called like Soma, or a place like Brick by Brick, or I remember, and there was,
Brick by Brick.
And then maybe even, and again, you were at UCSD, right? And didn't UCSD, like, because San Diego State had Montezuma Hall and had the back door, right? And they had the open air amphitheater, which was it's run down crap now, but it was a phenomenal place to see a concert because it held like 3,800 people and there wasn't a bad seat in the entire place because of the shape, because of the amphitheater, right? And I remember a couple times going to UCSD. I remember there was 1 or 2 venues there that, yes, and then again, maybe the college music, right? And I think that's was the cool. It was like, they're big on college radio, right? Which helped promote and help build big bands like REM. And I don't think those really exist. Concerts cost hundreds of dollars, per ticket now.
There's a pretty famous internet clip of Kurt Cobain being interviewed. And of course, this is the 90s during grunge, so this would have been the next decade. But he's reacting to the news that some people are actually paying $30 or more to see Madonna. And he and Dave Grohl are looking at each other going, $30? Are you insane? And Dave Grohl's trying to justify it by going, yeah, but I think she dresses up and, makes a big show out of it. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I guess then. But I mean, you can only imagine that how much it would be for a Nirvana ticket if they were still around and Kurt Cobain was with us. I mean, holy shit. But again, one of my greatest experiences of all time, and thank God I did it. I almost didn't go. I got talked into going to San Diego State University to their little club. You remember it, Chris. It was called the Back Door. And it might have held 200 people.
Yep,
I mean, you
yep.
might be able to squeeze in 200 people. And the stage was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Giant amplifiers. I had never heard of this band before, didn't know anything about them. And they take the stage. The guitar player and the bass player climb up on top of these Marshall stacks and hunch over like gargoyles. And then the lead singer comes out, super long black hair, leather jacket, and just leans into the microphone and launches into Blitzkrieg Bop.
I was going to say, that sounds like the Ramones.
And the entire time, I sat there with my jaw on the fucking floor. I had never in my life been so surprised by a band and had that kind of, it was almost like music from the dawn of time. They had deconstructed rock and roll. Instead of it being the motherfucking Eagles, right? The epitome of musical excellence and 17-part harmonies. This was just ga 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 ga. Oh my God. And when it was over, I think I was still standing there. I think they had to carry me out of there.
Your ears were ringing for a couple of days.
I could still hear rock and roll radio in my left ear on certain nights. Yeah. But oh my God, dude, the bands.
I saw them, and I want to say, I don't think I was at the Back Door, but I want to say I saw them at Montezuma, somewhere in San Diego State. It might even have been the amphitheater. I did see them somewhere in that. I don't know if it was Montezuma Hall. It could have been the Back Door, because I knew I did see them, and I remember having that experience of not being able to hear for days. Right. And I think for me, I get thinking back to that, and we've talked about this one. We saw it was Labor Day 1983, seeing at San Diego State at what was called Aztec Bowl, and seeing the Police, Madness, and Oingo and Oingo Boingo back to back to back.
Wow.
And the Police at the time, that was synchronicity. They were the biggest band in the world, right? Because they basically flamed out after that. They never recorded another album.
So Synchronicity was their last one, huh? I'll be darned. Okay.
They only had five studio albums.
I'll be darned. I didn't know that.
Yes,
okay.
and I more Police facts I'm happy to share. But that was, and again, we went to this concert, and it was about $15, and it was Labor Day, and it was out, and it was hot.
Wow.
And we were sweaty, and it was general admission, and we were all kind of, and all the people I was with, all of them. But I remember, and again, and I don't know if you can have, and again, it was $15, I think I'm saying, and you can't have an experience like that now. Certainly not for, you can pay.
It was the Police and Madness and who else?
Oingo Boingo. Okay, so you couldn't get any more 80s than that. And again, now $15 would probably get you a bottled water at Coachella, right? If you were going to and this wasn't a festival, but it was that sort of atmosphere. So,
Chris, now correct me if I'm wrong, and Danny Elfman has claimed this for a long time. Johnny was bad even as a child, and apparently everybody could tell. Am I right? Am I right in that? Everyone said if you don't get straight, you'll surely go to hell. Am I wrong?
Yeah, the lady down the block, she had a radio that Johnny wanted so bad.
Yeah. What did he do?
So he took it the first chance he had, and then he got away.
But then what did he do? Then he shot her in the leg, Chris.
Okay, you're right. I got ahead of myself.
There you go.
That's probably a better song than one of their other hits, which was very subtly titled "I Love Little Girls." They make me feel so good.
Yeah, that was a very interesting choice back then. Yeah, I don't know quite how they got away with that. and the lyrics don't even sound ironic. I don't quite get it either. Yeah.
There's not a drop of irony in that song. Okay, let's just call it
very
what
strange.
it is.
Yeah.
But
we'll move on.
yes, but if hey, Ringo Starr could sing about, she's beautiful, she's 16 and she's mine, and he clearly, I'm paraphrasing on that one.
I guess so.
And he clearly wasn't 16, he wasn't 18 or 19. Wow.
Right.
I mean that I don't know. It's I'm almost exhausted by thinking about the amount of callbacks and the flashbacks to the DJs, to the stations, to the styles, to the event part of it. Like you said, when a radio station, when 91X changed, what happens? Maybe that'd be a nice what if. What happens to you, Jeff, if 91X didn't change format? If they just went deep on the Sammy Hagar and Eagles and Journey music, they just went the other way, would you have found, would somebody have come up to hey man, come here, man, kid, come here, and somebody would have a brown paper sack that was all crinkled and wrinkled and kind of dirty, and check this out, man, check this out, and this guy tried to slide you a 45 of Whip It?
Yeah. Right. Okay. In a dark alley. Yeah.
Right. And hey man, check this out. First, it's was that what it would have taken to get you? What happens? What happens to you, Jeff? What happens to me if somebody made a really good choice that, again, we're going to change formats and we're going to pick this kind of music because it's blowing up. Somebody made that choice and they were right. And look at what happened in the years and decades later.
Yeah, I'm going to give myself some credit here. I mentioned this a long time ago, I think 15 episodes ago, when music came on the radio in the 70s and early 80s initially. I didn't like most of it. I liked some of it. Most of it depressed me. Almost all of the mainstream rock and roll, I just kind of pretended to be a cool kid with my friends. It literally depressed me. So I would like to believe, Chris, that even if the radio station 91X didn't make the format change and cater to all the cool music, I would have eventually found a way to go into the dark places, to find the alleys, to find the shadows, to search out the eclectic people, by God, to get my fix for something besides Wheel in the Sky. Just anything besides that, Chris. Anything other than the Scorpions. Anything other than Triumph or Rainbow or Judas Priest. Jesus, Mother of God Christ. I probably, either that, Chris, or I just would have been the most depressed human ever, and it just would have carried through to my adulthood, and I wouldn't have a smile on my face right now.
You know what they call that, Jeff? They call that fate. Somehow, some
They call
way.
it what?
Fate. That's fate. You would have found it.
Yeah.
It would have found you
sure.
like you would have found your wife even if you hadn't worked in the same movie theater. If you truly believe in fate, you would have found her something. I can't sum it up any more than that.
What a nice way to cap off the episode, Chris. I like that. Well done, sir.
I'm sensitive inside. I really, really am.
I think, Chris, that you are truly a fruit chew middle covered in a crisp candy coat. I think you meet the criteria for that. Sometimes maybe a little rough on the outside, but inside, man, it's all Skittles goodness.
Soft in the middle. I don't know about that, but I'll take it, Jeff. I'll take it. So again, this conversation based on thank you to our former classmate and loyal listener, Glenda B, who sent an email. Again, you got more stuff you want us to talk about? We'd be happy to do just that. Send us an email at nicepullpod@gmail.com. nicepullpod@gmail.com. So, Jeff, until next time.
Until next time, Chris.